In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro denounced the sanctions imposed by the United States and affirmed that they do not affect Venezuela's efforts to build a new productive economic model. In Argentina, national deputies from different political spaces met with students and pledged to participate in the Great National March of Universities to take place next week in defense of public higher education in the country. And the Commissioner General of the United Nations Agency, UNRWA, Felipe Lazzarini, said that Israel has not provided any evidence of the alleged presence of Hamas militants in the organization's teams. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro denounced the sanctions imposed by the United States and affirmed that they do not affect Venezuela's efforts to build a new productive economic model. The declarations were made during the celebration of government projects in the agro-industrial sector, where he emphasized the advances in growth and recovery of the nation through the promotion of sustainable development. The head of state stressed that progress has been made in the agricultural domestic product. He also added that Venezuela will be the fastest growing country in Latin America in the coming years.
Que ellos creen que nos asustan.
There is no sanction. There is no threat that today will harm the effort to build a new productive economic model, because today we do not depend on anyone in this world.
Al esfuerzo de construir un nuevo modelo económico productivo.
We only depend on our efforts, on our work, on the union that we have, on our intelligence, on our plans, of our wisdom, of our national goodwill. Rather, it gives us more impulse. The FARC surnames requested new sanctions from the United States. Their Dr. Jorge Rodriguez has demonstrated it today with an extraordinary press conference, and they believe they can threaten Venezuela. They cannot threaten Venezuela.
In this context, President Maduro assured that his nation does not need a license from the United States and that with or without them, the country would advance in its production and growth.
Nosotros no necesitamos licencia.
We do not need a license to grow, to produce, to work. Who said that we are slaves or that we are a colony? Nobody has told me that. At what point did we become a United States colony, a star of the United States? At what point? Somebody tell me. Venezuela is a country that walks on its own feet, thinks with its own head, produces with its own hands, and the new diversified, productive economic model will continue its course of growth. International Monetary Fund, get ready. Get ready. It will not be 4%. It will be 8%, and we will be the country with the highest growth in Latin America.
And we stay in Venezuela, where the National Electoral Council met with the accredited diplomatic corps and international observers in view of the upcoming presidential elections on July 28th. Previously, members of the Carter Center met with the authorities of the National Electoral Council in compliance with the electoral chronogram for the presidential elections. Likewise, the Council had received a technical delegation of the European Union in its second meeting with the Venezuelan electoral power. On the other hand, the president of the National Electoral Council, Elvis Amoroso, strongly rejected the false information about the electoral process and reiterated the participation of the media in the decisions of the elections.
There has not been at any time in this whole process that we call with 40% completed in just 1 month. There is no decision where the media and public opinion have not participated. I say this because it is very easy to distort information or tell lies, which we repudiate.
All the missions accredited in Venezuela are here today, and we are fulfilling an important task of providing first-hand information. As each of the governments and institutions accredited to our country requested to do, and we have also connected our 107 diplomatic missions abroad to serve as interlocutors of the advances of the electoral process.
The Day of the Struggle for Land is commemorated in Brazil on April 17th in memory of the 21 victims of El Dorado do Carajás massacre, which took place in 1996 in Pará. The Brazilian Landless Workers Movement, the MST, traditionally celebrates the struggle for agrarian reform on April 17th each year in memory of the group of landless workers who were camping and planning to march to Belém and were ambushed by the military. In this sense, this organization demands the Brazilian government to comply with Article 184 of the Federal Constitution, which allows the expropriation of unproductive properties and democratizes the access to land. For this purpose, they will carry out an artistic activity with the participation of renowned musicians, journalists, and activists of the landless workers movement in order to highlight the importance of agrarian production. We go now to Argentina, where national deputies from different political spaces met with students and committed themselves to participate in the Great General March of Universities in the country to take place next week. During the meeting, the legislators asked the national government to adopt measures to ensure the full functioning of the country's universities. They also analyzed the situation of university education, referring to the deep crisis it is going through due to the 72% reduction of its budget. So far, the cutback has had a serious impact on the salaries of all personnel, infrastructure, on scholarships, and even on its institutes and hospitals. In other news, in Haiti, the health system is near collapse as criminal gangs continue to attack and take control of hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies. The country's largest public medical facility was forced to close its operations after the area fell under gang control, joining 13 other hospitals in Port-au-Prince that have suspended services. According to human rights organizations, attacks by criminal gangs on health centers have left the most deprived sectors of the population without access to adequate medical care. Despite law enforcement efforts to curb gang violence, armed criminal groups have repeatedly attacked the country's medical facilities, bringing Haiti's health system to the brink of total paralysis.
There are no doctors, no nurses, no medical staff. The doctors can't even come here. None of the three main hospitals serving low-income communities in Port-au-Prince are functioning properly. The Sanatorium Hospital in Port-au-Prince, a specialized teaching hospital accessible to all, was looted by a group of gang members.
Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Commissioner General of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, the UNRWA, Felipe Lazzarini, said that Israel has not provided any evidence of the alleged presence of Hamas militants in the organization's teams. Following Israel's accusations, countries such as the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, the Netherlands, and France, under the leadership of the United States, suspended their contributions to the agency. Meanwhile, other countries such as Brazil decided to increase their contributions. Almost 2 months after this accusation, the organization has not received any evidence of the claims. On the other hand, it does not have evidence of the torture inflicted on its personnel and of the arbitrary detentions to which they were subjected. Activists and families of prisoners gathered in Ramallah and Gaza, holding Palestinian flags and portraits of Palestinian detained in Israeli prisons as they commemorate Palestinian Prisoners' Day, calling for release of detainees from Israeli jails. Rallies have been planned in Ramallah and Gaza to mark Palestinian Prisoners' Day in honor of the thousands of Palestinians who are being detained in Israeli jails. According to local media, activists and families of prisoners gathered on Wednesday, calling on the international community to intervene to release some of the Palestinian prisoners, especially those who are on hunger strike. Several of the Palestinian prisoners have not been charged with any crime. The Palestinian Prisoner Society said that more than 215 children and 14 women are also in jail. And Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani warns of the risk of expansion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the region following the failure of international talks. The Qatari Prime Minister said that negotiations for a new ceasefire in the Gaza Strip are in tense phase in which no breakthrough is shown due to Israel's rejections of Hamas' proposals for an immediate ceasefire and the release of Palestinian hostages. The leader of the Qatari diplomacy stated that the situation could trigger an escalation of violence in the region that would affect all the countries of the continent. Also, the Lebanese resistance Hezbollah launched guided missiles and drones against an Israeli military reconnaissance headquarters in the town of Arab al-Ramasha. The Hezbollah resistance movement affirmed that the attack is a response to the killing of several resistance fighters by Israeli bombardments in several cities of the country. The resistance confirmed casualties in the Israeli army ranks in the action targeting the aforementioned Israeli headquarters. In another action, the resistance targeted a gathering of enemy troops near the Ramia site with missiles and artillery shells. The Lebanese resistance continues its strike against targets belonging to the Tel Aviv regime in support of Palestine in the midst of the Israeli genocide and in retaliation to the bombardment of cities in southern Lebanon. In other news, the government of Iran stressed that Operation True Promise offered a new balance of power in West Asia. In his message addressed to Major General Abdul Rahim Mousavi, Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian expressed his gratitude and that of the Persian Foreign Ministry for the precise and effective planning, design and implementation of the operation in response to the attacks by the Israeli regime. He also reaffirmed that the measure was carried out on the basis of the principle of self-defense as stipulated in Article 51 of the UN Charter. The Iranian Foreign Minister highlighted the power of the Iranian armed forces in response to the constant aggression of the Israeli occupation regime. Syria reaffirms its commitment to the resistance during the 78th anniversary of independence from French colonialism. The residents of Golan, occupied by Israel since 1967, consider that this date will continue as a guide for the struggle and defense of the country's sovereignty. They expressed their rejection of the occupation and all Tel Aviv's expansionist and malicious plans aimed at separating the Golan from the motherland. The ruler of the Socialist Arab Ba'ath Party affirmed that the struggle and sacrifice are part of the culture and beliefs of the Syrian people, who who fight the battle against terrorism and imperialism that seeks to impose its control over self-determination of the peoples. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Italy, human rights defender and president of the Argentinian organization Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo, Stella de Carlotto, received an honorary doctorate degree from the University of Rome on Wednesday. The recognition granted to Stella de Carlotto ratifies the activist and the organization she leads as one of the most relevant examples of the struggle for human rights at an international level and for her civic, human, and cultural commitment. During the ceremony, Stella gave a speech in which she warned that some of the policies of memory, truth, and justice are in danger due to hate speeches and denialism, in many cases pronounced by members of the government of Argentinian Javier Milei. Carlotto also pointed out that the only way forward is the collective struggle with love and perseverance. In addition, she ratified that the organization will continue searching for more than 300 grandchildren whose identities have not yet been found. The government of Zambia requested international financing to mitigate the effects of the drought affecting the country. The president of the nation, Hakainde Hichilema, asked the international community for some $900 million in aid to deal with the situation. The president said that 9.8 million Zambians are affected by the effects of the drought, and of them 6.6 million are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. Hichilema described this as the worst drought the country has experienced since record began, which has damaged close to 1 million hectares of crops in 84 of the 116 districts. In Kenya on Wednesday, doctors and health workers continue to demand salary and labor improvements in their 5th weeks of protest. Precisely in the framework of the demonstrations, the health sector of this African nation accused the authorities of failing to comply with agreements established in 2017 and demand salary increases and better working conditions. In this sense, the activists affirmed that they will not in to intimidations and threats, and that they will continue with mobilizations until they achieve their objectives. In turn, the government called for calm and urged the health professionals to rejoin and fulfill their duties in the face of dozens of patients who have been left without access to medical services.
I must say that the healthcare in this country as we speak is in shambles. And that is a clear indication of the foot-dragging attitude of the government in solving this crisis. We feel that the government doesn't care. The government is celebrating in meetings, in seminars, and in conferences while Kenyans are dying, while doctors and healthcare workers are on the streets. They are all not on the streets because they love being on the streets. They are on the streets because there's a swelling disillusionment in the hospitals.
We now move on to other topics. In South Africa, at least 5 people were killed by heavy rains in the city of Margate in the KwaZulu-Natal province in the last few days. Local authorities reported that disaster relief funds are being mobilized for those affected by the storm in Margate, while teams on the ground continue to examine the full extent of the damage caused by the heavy rains. The provincial government also sent its condolences to the families of the victims. Meanwhile, disaster management authorities and other organizations remained on standby to assist those affected.
La evaluación continúa porque no se trata solo de Ray con Jenny. También estamos sufriendo algunos daños en Unzumbe y Undoni. Hay equipos en los sitios recopilando información sobre cuántas personas y hogares se ha visto afectados y cuánto va a costar.
Meanwhile, Indonesian authorities evacuated hundreds of civilians following increased volcanic activity in the northern Celebes province. The Center for Volcanology and Geological Disaster Mitigation confirmed that the crater activity was accompanied by lava, ash fallout, and a smoke plume almost 2 kilometers high. Authorities have not reported any casualties or injured people during the incident. However, more than 800 people were evacuated from nearby villages and relocated to the neighboring island of Tugadelandang. In this regard, the authorities raised the alert level from yellow to orange following the eruption on Mount Ruang. And in the Dominican Republic, the Emergency Operations Center increased to 16 the number of provinces on yellow alert and maintained 10 on green alert due to the rains caused by a throw. The agency advised the population to refrain from crossing rivers, streams, and creeks with a high volume of water in the provinces under alert. It also advised the population not to make use of bathing resorts due to the turbidity and volume of water that remained. The National Water Bureau announced that as of Wednesday, the throw will move eastward, moving between eastern Puerto Rico and the Lesser Antilles. In Copenhagen, firefighters worked for the second day in a row to extinguish a fire that has engulfed part of the old stock exchange building. Half of the iconic building, built between 1619 and 1640, burned to the ground, and the 54-meter spire that topped it collapsed after the fire broke out Tuesday morning. Although firefighters announced on Tuesday that the flames were under control, there were still active outbreaks in some parts of the building. Firefighters were also investigating that part of the building that was left intact, where equipment is being stored in case the fire continues. The building, located near the Danish Parliament, housed the Copenhagen Stock Exchange until 1970s and is now the headquarters of the Danish Chamber of Commerce. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For teleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.